How do we get bullion into Canada? If I could get a bunch of packages across the border and drop them off at a FedEx in Canada, we could ship it cheaper than anybody else.
We called the sheriff and he said, well, you know, we'd form a mile perimeter radius of your house. We'd give you one chance to answer the door. Do you think you can call down to the Brunswick County's Sheriff Office and ask if I could turn myself in? Drove through the night, and the plan was to go to our attorney's, Woody White's office, and then go over to the sheriff's office and turn ourselves in.
The plan was for him to go back for 5 minutes and then bring us, my wife and I, back. He was in there for an hour, and he came out, and it was the longest hour of my life. He said, everybody was in there. We had the FBI, Homeland Security, all the detectives, everybody was in there. Room was packed. So I got you off, you know, the federal charges. The Homeland Security still has a couple questions for you. And so we walked back. Homeland Security just had one question. They basically had a stack of papers. They said, who is this guy? And all of these papers. I said, well, that's the guy that does our cross-border orders into Canada. Cross the borders ourselves into Canada, and we shipped out from a local FedEx store, and that's one of our employees. And they said, oh, that's our only question. You're free to go. And it was ecstatic. So going back to, you know, what was the order, there was a grandma who was probably roughly about 90 years old, and she had placed an order with us through SD Bullion. And it was around $140,000, which is a transaction we see all the time. Thankfully, it was about one day every 3 months I'd be up at the office, and thankfully God put me there at that moment when one of the phone calls came in from this lady. And it happened to be a day that we were training a new customer service worker to answer calls. And so at the time, since we didn't have very many workers, the customer's voice would come in through the computer speaker, and they would have a headset on and they would respond to their headset. And I was in the room and I heard the conversation that was happening. And I said, that doesn't sound right. Put her through all the identity checks. It was the first order ever in SD Bullion history that we took a bank wire. This is 2014, so 2 years after we had started, so roughly maybe a little bit less than that. First time ever in SD Bullion history, we took a bank wire customer through every fraud technique that we have here. We were really serious in fraud based on the first year. We really were over the top, and what that meant was that she would have to go on a three-way verification call with her bank, verifying that this wire was indeed legitimate. She had to sign her papers. She had to submit her driver's license. We had all this stuff. We had 6 hours of recordings and documentation. And this lady thought, in retrospect, there was another actor. It wasn't us. There was somebody over, some criminal had convinced the lady her grandson was in danger. And in order for her grandson to be safe, they had to buy from SD Bullion, and they had to send gold to this shipping address, which she approved. And the gold more than likely got forwarded somewhere overseas. So the grandma was getting scammed by some person. Instead of sending money directly to them, they sent gold. And we did everything we could to help out this lady and stop her from doing this through all the phone calls and everything like that. But this happens pretty regularly. But at that time, it was pretty new for the police force to be dealing with it. So this county is a pretty small county, and they hadn't received proper instruction, and they almost took down our entire business. And the one thing I would say is that when I sat across from Sheriff Brenneman, it was $140,000. And I immediately referenced the verse Matthew 5:40 in my head. And what I said back to him was like, well, if it's about the $140,000, like if somebody accused me of stealing, or essentially thinks that I've stole from them, I'll give them the shirt off my back. So I offered to pay back this lady. Whatever she thought. It's like, this is not worth this. this is not worth this. At that point, I thought the business was already gone. I was hoping that I could keep my pharmacy license. But I'll give them the money. Like nothing is worth this. And I think in retrospect, that was a real test of where I think the devil was actually testing whether it was going to be about riches or I was going to be about him. And what SD Bullion stands for today is about him and being God. And it's what we've always been devoted for, is supporting Christian ministries with our success, all the Christian organization be able to support. And to this day, I just think back, that was the pivotal decision and the pivotal moments. And thankfully we made it through. And after a week, our bank accounts were unfrozen. It was the longest week of my life. It was crazy. But and thankfully we're not dealing with any of those stories since then. And everybody, even in the industry that we talked to, has never had a story like this one. So, but yeah, it was such a challenge, and I'm so glad that we're here today as the top 3 bullion dealer in the country, and able to tell this story for other people to hear about, what God's been able to do within our business.